Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation. We're going to give those folks online just about a minute or so. I know they're kind of filing in as we open up the room, so we'll give them, like I said, just about a minute or so, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Looks like they're all coming in now. Holy smokes. Participants. No, it's hidden now, but there was 32 people on the webinar yesterday too.
How are we looking? Should we get started? Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. We want to be mindful and respectful of your time. We got a handful of participants here in our office, and the bulk of you are joining us live. So welcome to today's class. My name is Jason DeBono, Vice President here at NewView. I've been here a little over 14 years, and I've got to see a lot of different things that people do to build wealth. Now, obviously, being in the alternative asset space, we see a lot of creative investments, and we love that side of the business. That's why we exist, is to give people choice. But one of the topics that I do love to talk about that I don't think gets nearly enough press and nearly enough use is Roth conversions. And so we're going to spend the next, probably 45 minutes or so talking through how it works, why it works, what the rules and regulations and requirements are, and really most importantly, what the opportunity is. Because regardless of what you choose to buy in your account, you still have to make some other decisions on whether or not you want to pay the tax up front or you want to pay it at the end. A couple of housekeeping notes. Those that are live, feel free to just blurt out questions if you have them. I'll read them aloud for those online. For those of you that are online, you do have, if you look at your control panel there, you should have an option there for Q&A or chat. If you enter in your questions in there, those will eventually make their way up here. I may not get to them immediately, but we'll take pause every so often. So please be sure to ask those. We want to make sure that you get out of exactly what it is that you need. And remember, I talk about this every day. So I get that what seems really easy for me may not be registering as quickly with you. So if you have questions you need to clarify, please put those out so we can get those addressed. So who is NewView Trust Company? NewView Trust Company is a South Dakota charter trust company. So our our compliance and operations operate out of South Dakota from a compliance standpoint. All of the administration is done here in Longwood, where I am actually presenting from. And that is done out of our NewView IRA operations office. So almost everything that you as a client or potential client would run through our operational office, all the stuff that happens in South Dakota is a little bit behind the scenes. But we're a fully regulated public trust company, which is very important for you from a safety and security standpoint. You want to make sure that you're doing business with someone that is fully regulated, and not everyone in this business falls under the same types of regulations. South Dakota is also the largest state for trust assets, so they're very familiar with what we do and how we do it. We've been in this business a little over 15 years. We've got a staff of close to 50 now that service accounts, and we're up to $1.3 billion in client assets. So not to say we've seen it all, right? Because there's always something creative that our clients choose to do. But as you can imagine, we certainly have seen quite a bit, and we've got quite a scope of experience in that process. So you may be wondering why we're talking about IRA types when we're here to talk about Roth IRAs. The reason that this is, to me, is a very important slide and a very good slide. Understand that the decision about what type of account you establish should be made on an annual basis. And if you think about that, it's because your situation changes. How much money you make in a year isn't identical forever, right? So how much money you make, how you make your money, your family situation may change from year to year. You may have had a kid, or you may have had a child that moved out, or you may have someone going to college, or whatever those things may be. You need to look through those on an annual basis and decide what's the best avenue for me to save. And I always like to give people, and we don't give advice, but I tell them from a standpoint of thinking this through, you want to start with what's the way to get the most money into tax advantaged accounts first. So think about how do we put away as much money, right? And then we can talk about whether or not we do that pre-tax or post-tax. And the beauty is almost every one of these accounts can be used to contribute. So for example, the SEP, which has a $50,000 contribution limit, much better than the Roth of 6, may actually be the better vehicle for you, even though you want a Roth, because you want to contribute more, so you use the SEP. But because IRA conversions are permitted, what can you do the day after you contribute to a SEP? Convert it to a Roth. So you're taking advantage of the higher contribution limits and Roth conversions, which we're here to talk about today. So when we think about this, remember, this is an annual decision. And as we talk through the things that you should consider in a Roth conversion, without question, you'll see that it's truly an annual decision. So whether you have traditional, SEP, or simple money today, existing accounts, those can all be converted to a Roth. Obviously, if you have a Roth, there's no need to convert it to a Roth. HSAs do not have any conversion opportunity, but understand that HSAs are vehicles to save for qualifying medical expenses, and the money actually goes in tax deferred and comes out tax free. So the HSA is probably the best account up here if you qualify, because a Roth, while it's tax free, is still taxable on the way in. Whereas an HSA is the only account that exists that's tax deferred on the way in, so it works like a traditional IRA, but it's also tax free on the way out, like a Roth, which is really cool. It just must be for qualifying medical expenses. The ESA account works just like a Roth. It's after-tax money, but it's tax-free coming out for qualifying educational expenses. And then the solo 401k, people call them QRPs. There's a whole bunch of different marketing terms. At the end of the day, it's a 401k where the only people covered under the plan are the owners of the business. So it requires you to not have any employees. So if you're a realtor and you have no common law employees, or you have a little consulting business, or you have a real estate business, if you meet the criteria of being self-employed, this plan is awesome. It has both a Roth component, so kind of like a Roth IRA, you can put in $19,000 into the Roth directly, but then it also has a profit sharing component, kind of like a SEP IRA. This portion, the $31,000 or $37,000, is going to be pre-tax. However, we know that if we put pre-tax money into a retirement account, what do we become eligible to do the next day? Do a Roth conversion, right? So even though we're talking today, and that's going to be the theme, just keep in mind that you don't have to start with a Roth. Pick the account or accounts that give you the maximum deferral opportunity, and then decide if you want it to stay pre-tax or if you want to move it to a Roth. Two completely independent decisions. And we're going to talk about how that decision may be made at the investment component, right? That decision also can be made in pieces, meaning I can convert a little today, a little tomorrow, a little the next year, and I can start spreading tax risk out. So there's a lot of strategies.
If I have over $250,000 worth of self-employed income, which means I'd be eligible to contribute to a SEP IRA, although because I earn too much, I'm not able to contribute to a Roth IRA, am I able to contribute to the SEP and then convert to a Roth, or does that still make me not eligible to do that?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, if my income is too high, right, to contribute directly to a Roth, and just so you know, the income limit for a Roth, I believe, and don't quote me, is 110 and 166. It starts to phase out, whether you're filing singly or filing jointly. You can go look at the numbers yourself, but let's assume you make $200,000 a year. You are ineligible to contribute directly to a Roth. However, you could contribute to a traditional and convert it the very next day. Or if you qualified, you may choose the SEP so that you can put 25% of that 200 or 50,000 into your SEP and then turn around the next day and convert it to a Roth. It's like making a $50,000 contribution to a Roth. And that's pretty powerful stuff. When we start, we don't just jump right into the Roth. We want to make sure that you're looking at these different plan types and considering what's the best for you, then making the conversion decision or the tax decision. They are two completely independent decisions. And I've seen people that I've talked to that have become clients said, God, I wish I could put more into my Roth. And I've said, well, have you looked at other types of accounts? And they were told years ago that the only type of account, if they wanted it to be Roth, they had to go into the Roth. And so they've been foregoing abilities to sock away 20% a year and only putting in 6 because they want that tax-free growth. Well, you don't have to give up contribution eligibility for tax-free growth. You can have the best of both worlds. Higher contribution limits based on the plan types here, and then using Roth conversions to move that money from a pre-tax state to a post-tax state. So I use this, this is probably one of my favorite slides to talk about because there's lots and lots in this one graphic that can be talked about. So let's start with this. So if we take this, this is building the case for compound growth. Now keep in mind that compound growth does not mean Roth IRA versus traditional. All IRAs have compound growth, right? All IRAs have compound growth. That means they're only taxed at withdrawal or at entry. They're not taxed every year that they're growing. When I take this, and for those of you, hopefully you can see it as big on your screens at home, but if I take $1 and I start an account and I double that dollar every year. Now we understand doubling your investment is not likely on an annual basis, but using the rule of 72, maybe it's every 7 years, right? You can double that money. So take this as doubling periods, whether they're annual or not is less of the issue. But what this says is it says every time I earn money, right, during that compounding period, I got to pay tax. So if you go buy and put $1 into an investment, it spits you back $2. You have $1 of basis, right, which is what you invested, and $1 of growth, right? That $1 of growth is taxed at 25%. So you have 25% tax that you will pay. Move this up a little bit, may make it better. You have 25% of that dollar that you're going to pay to Uncle Sam. So you go from $2 to $1.75, right? Hopefully everybody's with me on that. Then I take my $100.75 and I double it, right? Now I got $350. $175 of that is growth. I got to pay tax, so 25% comes off the top. I'm left with $3.06. I double that. I've got $3.06 of profit. 25% comes off of that. And you can get the idea going all the way down. That number at the bottom is $72,000. That means over 20 periods of doubling, you can turn $1 into $72,000. Pretty good, right? I think we'd all be pretty impressed. But this is meant to illustrate how much you're losing by not doing that in a compounding tax vehicle, right? So when you do this, and I've got a couple of questions. I'll get to those in just a second. But if you were to do this same thing, you were going to take $1 and you were going to double it. And instead of what this is illustrating, doing that in your personal account where it's taxed, what if you did that in an IRA account? Whether it be Roth or traditional, doesn't matter. Any idea how much money you'd have if you didn't have that 25% tax on every earnings period? Any ideas? Go ahead, you can guess out a number. What do you think?
100,000.
Higher than 100,000.
Close to $1 million.
Close to $1 million, right? Slightly higher than that. Grace, can you, $1,048,576. Now, the first thing that I usually, when people see that, is they start checking the math, right? Because it almost seems impossible. What this slide is illustrating is $72,000 is a great return, but it's less because every time I earned money, right, every year, because this is personal money, I had to pay tax on my profits. Over here, I didn't have to pay tax. So instead of reinvesting $1.75, I reinvested $2. Now, that quarter doesn't seem like a big deal, but that quarter over 20 periods, and you can start to see, right, if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines to 32, you're only at 16 over here. It didn't take but 5 compounding periods to double your money. And that's the penalty of tax. And I'm not telling you that tax is a penalty all the time. I get it, right? We have to have some services and we need taxes to support those, right? Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, I think everyone agrees tax at some point and some limit makes sense. But the IRS also provides us opportunities to invest without taxation. And that IRA is designed to encourage you to save for retirement. And what they're giving you to save for retirement is this type of tax advantage growth. Now, there's two ways that this could be handled. If this was a traditional, a SEP, a simple, what we would refer to as a pre-tax account, meaning you got a deduction on the way in, what do you pay on the way out? Tax. So if I did this in a pre-tax IRA, I would pay tax as I took the money out. So, and I've got a slide. So if I were to come in here, this is the 2019 tax bracket. So let's say I had my $1 million, $48,000. This would determine how much tax I pay. Probably wouldn't withdraw all that money at once, right? Nope. If the whole point of retirement is I may take it out $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 a year, and you can see if you plug that in, if I took less than $165,000, I would pay 24% effective rate, right? Maybe even a little bit less. But overall, the contribution, or sorry, the distributions as I took them out would be taxable. Now, if I go back to this slide, and Grace, I can't click, sorry. If I go back to this, if I did this in a Roth, what would I pay tax on?
Just the
Just what I put in, $1. So now you're starting to understand the power of the Roth when you have big earnings. So I could have taken this, put $1 in. Sure, I can use a mic. Sorry, we're going to switch over the sound and see if that helps. Give me just a second. All right. Well, hopefully I keep this up here long enough. But for those of you that are online, can somebody just maybe chime in and let us know if changing this over has helped? Hopefully you guys can hear this better. Sorry that we had that issue to begin with. All right, so let's go ahead and sounds better. Thank you for that. So I want to talk about a couple things on this slide. So number one, if you have the ability to make an investment through a retirement account or other tax advantage vehicle, can you close that, Grace? Sorry. Before, instead of doing it in your personal account, the amount of earnings can be staggering. I mean, look at the difference that you get to keep because you're investing more. So the first thing to understand on this slide is just how IRAs work in general, and that's the power of compound growth. The second thing that this slide illustrates is inside of that decision to save to a retirement account is decision number two, and that is, do I pay the tax up front or do I pay the tax at the end? Now, I think we would all agree, without fail, everyone would agree in this example, pay the tax on $1. Choose a Roth, pay tax on $1, and have $1 million tax-free. But that decision may not be as easy when the numbers aren't so glaringly obvious. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But just remember this. When you save in a compounding vehicle like an IRA, you are putting yourself at a significant advantage over those that don't, as illustrated here. Secondly, inside of that decision, you may be able to even proactively choose to pay the taxes on your terms. And we're going to talk about that as well. So what does it mean? It's very simple. Pay taxes today and never again. That's what a Roth conversion is. As it stands today, any money inside a Roth IRA grows 100% tax-free. That means that as you distribute, as long as you follow the rules, have it at least 5 years, and are over age 59 and a half, there is no tax on any of the earnings or the principal as you pull it out. So think about that as far as Roth, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's go ahead and pull those questions up, and we'll get those addressed. All right, so it says, a CPA is advising that a traditional IRA cannot be converted to a Roth because the client is retired and has no earned income. Great question. Now, I will only answer this with the limited information I have, but I don't have context to suggest there may be different info. A Roth conversion does not require earned income. A Roth contribution requires earned income. Any IRA contribution requires earned income. But converting from a pre-tax IRA like a traditional to a Roth does not require earned income. You can do that at any point in your life. In fact, we have lots of clients that do that very late in life. One of the reasons that a lot of clients do, and we're going to talk about some of these reasons, but one of the reasons specifically a lot of people do when they're retired is their income taxes drop significantly, right? They may only have Social Security if they have that, you know, if they even are collecting that. So conversions become a lot less expensive. The other reason they do that is all pre-tax accounts, meaning everything but the Roth, has an RMD at 78.5. That means at 78.5, you have to take money out and you have to pay tax. If you convert to a Roth, you don't have to take money out. Therefore, you don't have that tax liability. But keep in mind, you would have made the tax decision on conversion. Right? But to go back to that question, there is no earned income requirement to do a Roth conversion. So here's the tax bracket. So here's what we have to decide. What you're deciding as an individual taxpayer is the tax that I pay today on the smaller amount, i.e. the seed, better than the tax I will pay later on the larger amount, in this case, the crop. Now that takes a lot of things into consideration, and we're going to walk through those here in a second individually. But if you were to convert in 2019, you would add the amount that you convert. So if you take $50,000 out of your traditional IRA and move it to a Roth, you will add $50,000 to your income. So if you're sitting here at $100,000 and you add $50,000, the cost to that conversion, if you're filing jointly, is 24% of the $50,000. So the higher your tax bracket, the more expensive the conversion is, right? The lower your tax bracket, the cheaper it is. This is why I go back to, at the very beginning, I said this is an annual decision because it changes every year. Tax rates change every year. So if it makes sense for you to convert this year, it may not make the same sense next year, and it may not have made sense last year, but this year it does. And that has a lot of factors that go into it, but you won't know the answer to the question if you don't address it at least annually. And that decision should be considered on an annual basis. So I want to talk about a couple of things here, and then I'm actually going to explain why I have this, this picture up here, and it is not because I'm a New England Patriots fan. But I will get to why that picture is there, and hopefully this will illustrate the things to consider. But as we walk through this, here's some things you got to think through, right? How's the investment going to perform? Remember, what you're paying tax on is the basis. It's the growth that's tax-free. So it doesn't make sense to convert a $100,000 IRA, pay tax on $100,000, and then go put it into a CD at 2%. It's not going to generate enough returns to justify that upfront payment. But if I have the ability to go buy into an investment that I believe is going to perform, maybe at double-digit returns, well, now I'm buying a significant amount of return on that $100,000 that justifies that upfront paying of the tax. Make sense? The certainty. So is it likely, and what's the certainty? Those are two completely different things. How old are you, right? How many doubling periods do you have? Is another consideration. Lifespan, ability to pass on the account to your heirs. So some of this may not even be about you. It may become an estate planning tool. Tax brackets, current and future. And then peace of mind in retirement. One of the things that I think is often overlooked about a Roth, and so many people say, always pay the tax later. You'll be in a lower tax bracket. Always pay the tax later. And it's kind of an old stigma that a lot of old accountants, right, use. Always pay it later. Always better to get a deferral. There's a few reasons for that, why they tell you that. Number one, it's because they know that you want to pay as little as tax as possible. And if you want to pay as little in tax as possible, you got to have pre-tax accounts, right? Those are deductions. They're beneficial. Yet I would suggest I want to pay as much tax as possible. Because the more I pay, the more I what? Earned. Tax is the result of making money. So I'm not scared to pay taxes. I want to minimize it, right? I want to strategize so I can be effective with it. But at the end of the day, paying tax doesn't scare me. But I have no problem paying tax today if I'm going to get significant benefit later. So I use the example, even if I go back to that $1 million example, right? We put in the dollar and it doubled. if I've got $1 million and I decide to retire and it's in a pre-tax account and I am sitting on the beach in Costa Rica and I order a Mai Tai, right? I have to take out $10 out of my account to pay for the $7.50 Mai Tai, right? Because it's pre-tax. I got to take that out and I got to pay. If I paid little by little as I went, meaning paid as I contributed in the case of a Roth, and I want to go buy a $7.50 Mai Tai, I only have to take $7.50 out. So when we say peace of mind at retirement, it's nice because you know exactly how much you have. The other thing is, regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, right, there is no doubt that depending on the administration that's in office will determine tax rates. And there are definitely candidates today that have made no bones about it. If they're elected in 2020, tax rates will likely go up. Now, whether you're in the bracket affected by that or not is not the case. The question is, over time, are those rates going to be higher or lower? No one has a crystal ball. If I did, I would be too scared to even look into it. But I can tell you, tax rates have a high likelihood of going up. Whether it's marginal or whether it's significant is yet to be determined. But if tax rates do go up, there's some built-in protection in a Roth IRA, right? Because you've paid it as you went. So we're going to talk a little bit about more of these here in detail. And I'm going to pull up the whiteboard here and illustrate. But you may be wondering, what in the world does this graphic here of, I think, the greatest joke in sports history. I think it's okay to say that. And I'm neither a New England fan or an Atlanta fan. So, but this is to illustrate that there are 4 quarters in a game. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4. And this also illustrates that you can lose 3 of the quarters and still win the game, right? Because if you recall, and there's 2 minutes left when this changed, who won the first quarter of this game? Atlanta. Second quarter, Atlanta. Third quarter, Atlanta. Fourth quarter, New England. Who got the rings? New England. I share that with you because so many times, and accountants do this frequently, and it's not because they're trying to do anything wrong. It's because you've encouraged them to act in a certain way, right? How do we talk to our accountants? How much am I going to pay? Save me money. How much am I going to pay? Save me money, right? Well, what are we telling our accountants? That the most important thing to us is saving money. And what we really should be talking to them about is the most important thing to me is building wealth. And if tax is a part of building that wealth and part of the strategy, I'm okay with that. But we don't really give them that insight. So what they do is they look at the current tax rate and they say, well, it's going to cost too much to convert. It's not worth it. And you know what? If you only looked at that first quarter, you'd be right. Just like if you only looked at the score at the end of the first quarter, Atlanta's your Super Bowl champion. But I'm going to walk you through the 4-quarter thought process today. So we are going to start, and I'm going to try to do this with one hand. All right. Can you slide that over, or do you want me to slide this over? All right. Now, trying to read that chicken scratch is probably not easy either, but that says current tax rate. So remember what I said. Accountants, if they only look at this as a 1-quarter game, because we kind of force them into that, they're going to look and say, based on your current tax rate or based on, how much this is going to cost, it probably doesn't make financial sense. So first quarter of this game is current tax rate. Why is that important? It's because it's the tax rate I'm going to pay on my conversion. So if I decide to convert 50%, it's going to cost, or 50,000, it's going to cost me whatever my current tax rate is times that 50,000. Right? Do I need to move this? Sure. How's that? All right. So that first quarter is a big one. It's an important one, right? Because it defines the only variable in this that we know, right? It's a variable that we actually know, and that is, what do I got to pay? And that tax rate is published, right? I just showed you what 2019 is. If you know what your income is, you can calculate what that cost is. The second one, second quarter of this game, future tax rate. Now, this is unknown, right? We don't know what that future tax rate is ultimately going to be. It could be lower, it could be higher, it really depends. But don't just think of this this future tax rate as where tax rates are. Also think about this as to where your income is. One of the misnomers that I see out in the world is when people say, well, my tax rate will be lower at retirement. And the first thing I want to do is ask them why. Why do you assume you'll be, that's like a plan to fail mentality. I'll just pay the tax later because I'll have less money later. Well, to me, I'm thinking to myself, I want to build wealth and long-lasting wealth. I hope my income is higher when I retire. Understand that retirement in my eyes, and hopefully in your eyes, does not mean that you stop making money. What does it mean? You stop working full-time. But I can have passive investments and other investments that can generate cash and keep my income up. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great problem to have. Retirement just says I don't got to show up somewhere every day. But you better believe I want as much mailbox money as I can get, right? I want passive investments that have gone out and used along the years and built up a portfolio of stuff that generates me income. So when I retire, I got news for you. My income hopefully will be higher than it is today. So I'm not looking at future tax rate and saying Roth makes more sense to me because I think, we're going to be a political environment where tax rates will be 80%. I'm saying it because if they stayed the same, I still will have to pay more because I hope to make more money at retirement. So why not pay the tax today? So quarter number 2, future tax bracket. Remember, number 1, where do you think it'll be? And number 2, where do you think you'll be in respect to that tax bracket? Number 3. Time. Time is a very, very important consideration. Why is time an important consideration? What do you think? Well, so the answer was it allows you to save more money, but I'll actually take it from not just save more money, but invest longer. When we talk about how to calculate the future value of money, right? It's time and return. How long do you have and how much is it making? In that process, you're able to get a gauge of what that will be worth down the road. Time as well as return. But time is so incredibly important, right? Incredibly important this consideration, but I want to touch on time and then I'll get to those questions, Grace. Couple thing on time. Time may not just be your investment lifetime. Because one of the things that's great about IRAs in general, but even Roths, is you can pass those to heirs and they can extend them over their life expectancy. So I have an 8-year-old. I could, right, pass my retirement account, my Roth specifically, to my son. So when I pass away, if I haven't spent all the money, right, he would then inherit it. Hopefully he's a lot older than he is today when he gets it. And then he too could invest it over his life expectancy. So I may not just calculate my life. Hopefully I built enough passive income where I may not even need my IRAs to live off of. But I can use that as an estate planning tool to pass it down and give that growth. They call it, Ed Slott refers to this, a big IRA guy, if you don't know who he is, as a stretch IRA. Right? And there's some big benefits and there's some provisions in it. You need to understand what that means. But that stretch provision is a big one. And another reason why when it comes to time, we tell people, don't just think about you, think about, your potential heirs.
So that example you just gave in regards to passing on the Roth IRA to your son, if you were to pass on a pre-tax IRA and he isn't at age 70 and a half, does he still have to take required minimum distributions because even though you've passed away, you're over the age of 70 and a half, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. I'll summarize that because there was, I think, a couple questions in there. If you pass an IRA down right? And this is specifically, I'm going to use the term to pass it to a non-spouse, because the rules are different if you pass it to a spouse. If you pass your IRA to a non-spouse, child, grandchild, whomever, no matter what type of IRA they inherit, they really have three choices, right? One, they can withdraw the whole account, right, as a lump sum distribution. They have until, I believe it's 12/31 of the year following the date of death. If it's pre-tax, they got to pay tax on it, right? If it's Roth, they don't have to pay tax on it as long as the criteria were met for tax-free distributions. The second option they have is to withdraw it after 5 years. So that means if they choose the 5-year election, they can take it over a 5-year period. There's no required minimum distribution. It just all must be out by the 60th month. So they could take it little by little. They could take it month 59. But it all has to be out by the end of 5 years. And that declaration has to be made up front. You can't change your mind on that. If you choose the 5-year option, what you take out, if it's pre-tax account, is taxed. If it's a Roth, again, so long as the criteria are met, it's tax-free. So the decision on whether you take it out or not and whether you owe tax is already made for you based on the type of account. The third way is to take it over life expectancy. That means that in this case, my son, if he has 40 years left based on the IRS's life expectancy table, he would have to take a little bit out each year, as he's required to take it out. If it's Roth, it's tax-free. If it's traditional, it's taxable. The RMD, or I'm sorry, the required minimum distribution for beneficiaries only applies to those that take it over life expectancy. Whether it's pre-tax or post-tax, there's still an RMD. They still have to take money out on an inherited account. That's correct. Let's go ahead and pull up those questions. I know a few things have come in. All right. Can you scroll up a little bit? All right. So somebody asked about, go ahead and scroll down for me. Somebody asked about getting a copy of the event. And yes, we can, we'll distribute out a copy of that. Let me just read that. Yeah, and I'll just summarize that comment. Basically, someone stating, hey, and this is, let me step back first and let me say this. We can go ahead and close that out, Grace. The beauty of what I love about what we do here at New View with self-direction is everybody is entitled to their own opinion. And it doesn't have to be the opinion of everybody for you to be able to do that. So for example, you may think real estate's the world's greatest investment and stocks are the worst, right? Or you may feel the opposite. Either way, the choice is yours. We're here for the people that want to make decisions based on their beliefs and understanding and knowledge of whatever scenario it is. The comment that was up here basically says, tax rates used to be much higher. They came down, but at our spending rate, they got to go up. It's just mathematics. And I would say, I agree with that. Now, not everybody out there does agree with that, and that's okay. And the beauty of Roth conversions is if you believe that's the case, meaning there's no way we can cover this deficit without raising taxes, then what does that suggest? It suggests that from a future tax rate standpoint and from a current tax rate standpoint, a conversion is going to win you 2 of the 4 quarters, right? Whether or not that becomes reality, none of us know. But the beauty of self-direction is you get to act on that decision. And that's, I think, the thing I love most about what we do is you get to act on those beliefs, right? So when we talk about time, we want to make sure that people understand time is a major factor in this decision. In my opinion, could be one of the biggest. And the reason is time is a major factor from growth. And I'll illustrate that. I'm going to go back here. Oop, Grace, can you... If we were to just have one more year on this 20-year to 21 years, that number becomes 2.1 million. What if we just added 2 years? That number becomes 4.2 million. 3 years, 8.8 million. Time can make all the difference in the world for you. And keep in mind that when you do a Roth conversion, you're buying the earnings, not the basis, because you got to pay tax on that. You're buying the earnings. Now, we are obviously talking about this in a doubling scenario, but here's the reason why I think time is also most important. It's the item we control the most. Now, I get it, right? I could walk out of here to go grab lunch and get hit by a bus, right? And there, I'm out of time. However, I think we all have to at least play into the assumption, if I thought that was going to happen, I wouldn't even be saving in a retirement plan anyways, right? I'd just go buy a lot of good life insurance for my family. This decision around saving says I'm going to be here later in life, and I need to have enough money to live through that. And if somebody's saving with only 10 doubling periods and somebody saves at 20 doubling periods, somebody's going to have $1,000 and somebody's going to have $1 million. Not because they saved more, because they both started with $1, not because somebody was a better investor because they both doubled their money, but because they gave themselves more time. It's the one item that we control. It's why we tell people save as early as you can and save as much as you can. Let me tell you why saving as much as you can makes a difference. What if instead of saving $1, I save $2? You know, how much would that number be at the bottom? And I just had to save $2 instead of $1. So these are things that we control. We control how long we have. We control how much we save. We control how long we have by saving sooner, by doing a Roth conversion younger, not waiting till we're older and we got more earnings to pay tax on, to pay it on the least amount. We also control how much we put away. We control whether we save $1 or $2, and it has significant impact on growth. We do not control return. We think we do, right? And yeah, there's lots of good investors that can be pretty darn close, but at the end of the day, there's so many factors outside of our control that affect return, market conditions, et cetera. And if you're relying on that alone to get you there, that's going to be a real challenge. The last item here, and I kind of started talking about it a little bit, is growth. What is it going to be when the tax bill would be due, right? How much is that account going to have in it? Because if it doesn't grow enough, it may not make sense. Why pay tax on $50,000 to go invest it into a CD at 3%? It's not going to generate enough earnings to justify me writing a big check. So when we talk about growth, growth is a byproduct of a couple things, right? It's a byproduct of time. The other thing that I want to touch on for growth, and I want to touch on as a strategy, is a lot of people assume that they have to convert, cash. So what does that mean? It means if someone wants to convert 50 grand, it has to be in cash. And the fact is that's not true. You can convert assets just like you convert cash, and you pay tax on the fair market value. And I use this example, and I probably could find a more relevant one these days, but if you were to invest into the IPO of Facebook, right, many years ago, I believe it opened at 40. Does anyone remember what it went down to? Right? It was down in like the 20s, low 20s, I think. It was half the value, or maybe it was 80 to 40, but you get the idea. If you believe that, hey, this investment is still good, yes, the snapshot in time market value today says it's not worth as much, but I know that Facebook's really got a lot of headwind. If you convert it at 20 instead of the 40 you bought it at, you only pay tax on the 20. Yet all the growth from 20 to wherever it is now is completely tax-free. If you invest into a piece of real estate, right? And for whatever reason, the market value of that real estate has dropped. And this does happen, right? I know we've been in a rising economy, even stocks and other things have all seemed to do well, but there are plenty of assets that people invest into that they're still good investments, they've just lost value. And remember, market value is just a snapshot in time, right? We see this a lot when people invest into development deals. Right? Sticks and bricks for a while, there's no real income, so the material value drops. But if you believe that's the case, that Roth conversion can be very opportunistic because that upside is all yours, right? So there's some strategies that can be deployed not only just from a straight Roth conversion in general, but you may have an asset that makes Roth conversion attractive. So don't view this, number one, as a one-quarter game. Look at all 4 of these categories and then determine the score. If you win the game, who cares if you lost 3 out of the 4? You won the game, right? No one cares. New England still got their Super Bowl ring, right? They're still in the record books as champs. Atlanta lost. Are you doing that with Roth conversion decisions? Are you not making these as a 4-quarter decision and passing up opportunity?
When it comes to converting cash, so for example, let's say I have $100,000 in cash in a pre-tax IRA, but I want to convert $25,000 of that $100,000 to a Roth. When I'm converting that $25,000, do I have to pay those taxes out of pocket, or do they come out of the $25,000 that I'm converting to the Roth account?
All right, so great question. So the question to summarize it was, if I have a $100,000 IRA, traditional, and I want to convert 25 of that 100 into a Roth. So let me start there. 25,000, sorry. Let me start there. First of all, that's a strategy lots of our clients deploy, right? They just convert a little bit each year. And when you look at the tax rate, the tax brackets, right? There's a reason why you may want to strategize it, because the tax rate gets higher. So depending on your income, if my wife and I show income of $145,000, that puts us just under the 24% tax bracket. Well, if I'm going to do a conversion, I don't want to convert more than 20,000 because I want to stay under 165. Because if I go over 165, I got to start paying more tax, right? So that's a strategy that I can work with my accountant to say, how much of my account can I convert at what price? So you can decide where on this tax bracket it makes sense. So I may say, you know what, at 24%, a Roth conversion, it makes great sense. At 32%, it's questionable. So why convert just enough to stay at the 24% threshold? And we see clients that do very random conversions, like $27,452. Why? Because that's the exact amount that they can convert without jumping tax brackets. So the first part of that is, yes, you can absolutely do a partial conversion. Now, the question becomes, how do you pay the tax? Well, ask yourself this question. Who owes the income tax? The IRA or you? You do. It's your tax. So if you owe the tax, who has to pay the tax? You. If you want to pay the tax out of the IRA, you have to take it as a distribution. Tax and penalty will apply, then you can pay it. So in practical terms, it doesn't make any sense, because if you took your $100,000 IRA and converted 25,000, and let's just say the tax on that was $5,000, right? In order to pay the $5,000 personally, if you wanted to use your IRA, you got to take out $5,000. You're going to pay $500 in penalty, and you got to take enough out for tax. It may cost you another $1,000 or $1,500. It's probably not worth it. But if you pay that $5,000 out of your personal account, think of it like this. It's like an extra $5,000 contribution to your retirement account. And you avoid the tax and penalty. But you are responsible to pay taxes, not your IRA. So if you choose to use IRA money to pay taxes, it's a withdrawal. And if it's an early withdrawal, it's penalized. And if it's a pre-tax account, it's taxed.
The money that you use to pay that tax, could you, for example, if you have another asset like real estate, could you take out an equity line to pay that tax on the conversion of those funds? Or does it have to be like earned income?
Yeah, so the question is, are there some strategies that you can deploy if you do owe that tax to pay it? So first of all, you can deploy these strategies, whether it's regular taxes or whether it's a tax because of a conversion. Understand that it's still a normal tax paying process, right? Due April 15th, or you can file an extension, but it's not a separate tax. It's on your tax return as a whole. Yeah, how you choose to pay your taxes annually is up to you. If you wanted to go take a credit line to pay your taxes, you could, right? And if you thought that it made sense to do a larger conversion, even if you didn't have the income, but you had the equity maybe in your home and you wanted to take an equity line to do it, you could do that. It may be a good strategy. I don't know, right? It would depend on how much equity do you have? Is that the most effective use of the equity? What do the rest of the quarters look like? You know, but yeah, if all 4 of these quarters were like grand slams for you, yes, 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 and you just lack the capital to pay for it and you wanted to go finance it, you could certainly do that. Just understand that's you financing your expense, has nothing to do with your IRA. You still have to pay your equity line, right? That's your problem. The IRA is not going to help you with that. But now that IRA is in a tax-free growth state, right? And again, if all 4 quarters are slam dunks, it very well could be an attractive option for you. So when we talk about these four items, they're all different and they're going to change every year, right? Your current tax bracket will be different in 2020 than 2019. And depending on, how the elections go, it may be different in 2021. So you should be looking at this year over year. Your future tax rate will change. Just like if your current tax rate's changing, you better believe 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, your future tax rate is going to change. Time will change. Every year that goes by is one less doubling period, right? One less investable period. And then growth. The market may have better returns. And I say the market, not the stock market in general, just the overall investment market. If you invested into any asset in 2012, you've probably done really well on it, right? If you bought it in 2005, maybe not as well. There are market conditions that do impact how much money your investments can generate. And so during those periods, it may expose opportunities for Roth conversions because you may not win these 2 quarters. But man, with the time and the growth, you may have enough opportunity to win 2 quarters or 1 quarter of the game and still win it. Right? But you got to make sure you're factoring in all 4 of these things before we decide. We talked about passing on IRAs and being able to stretch them over time. The one thing that is really cool is your spouse can actually take the beneficiary as their own. So if I pass away, my wife, if she's the designated beneficiary, can take my IRA and just move it right into her account. She doesn't have to make an election to take it as a lump sum. She doesn't have to wait 5 years. She doesn't have to take it over life expectancy with RMDs annually. She can simply move it into her account. Now, here's the beauty. She actually has choices. Depending on my age, depending on the tax, she may choose to take it over 5 years. Because she's far from 59 and a half, she may not want to make it her own. If she does, she's going to wait till she's 59 and a half to take it. Now, if she doesn't need the money or she wants to take advantage of the growth, then yes, she can make it her own. But if she thought, you know what, I better take this over my life expectancy because I need access to that money sooner than 59 and a half without penalty, then maybe that election could be made. But just know that only spouses can take an IRA into their own name, right? Non-spouses cannot. I think that gets us to the end. We've got about 5 minutes or so for questions. So I don't know if we have any online. I think we're pulling that up now. Let's see what's coming in. If you do have questions, now would be a great time to get those addressed. Any questions from anyone here? We'll give just another minute or so. One thing that I do want to point out is I did have a little bit on the slide on this, but I don't think I actually mentioned it. With the tax law changes that the Trump administration passed, right? They reduced our tax rates, right? However, one of the provisions that was inside there that most people don't realize now is Roth conversions are irrevocable. So prior to that change, if you made a Roth conversion, you could decide all the way until you filed your taxes October of the following year that you wanted to undo it. Now it is irrevocable. So if I convert 25 grand, I can't convert it today. And then when I get to paying the taxes, if I don't have the money or I thought the asset would perform or anything differently, whatever it is, I can't undo it. Right. So something to be very, very aware of. It's a permanent decision. And that was something that used to be a really powerful tool. And we would always, talk to clients about is if you think you should convert, because you'll find out in April, right, what your tax situation looks like. If it doesn't look favorable, the other thing that we used to see people do is convert because they thought an asset was going to see a big spike. And if the asset didn't see as big a spike as they thought, they could undo it. But that is no longer permissible. And I know if you've sat in on any of our older webinars and presentations over the years, we talked about that as a strategy. And I want to make sure everyone understands that is no longer a strategy.
So if I had a previous 401k from an employer and now I'm pursuing a career as a self-employed individual, but I haven't actually earned any self-employed income yet, would I still be able to roll my 401k funds into a SEP IRA or a solo 401k, even though I'm self-employed, but I haven't earned any self-employed income yet?
So the question really is two-part, and I'll summarize it. It said I've got a past, an employer, 401k with a previous employer, and I've quit that job and started my own business. I'm self-employed. When you're self-employed, there are a couple types of accounts that generally are better for you, either the SEP or the solo 401k. And the question is, if I haven't actually made any money yet, in either of those, can I go ahead and set up the SEP or SEP or 401k, do the rollover? Can I do that ahead of having income? And I would say first, that's probably a better CPA question, a question for your accountant, because there's a lot that goes into whether or not you have self-employed income. As a general rule, you have to, especially for the solo 401k, you have to have an operational business. Now, doesn't mean you're set up as an entity. You could be a sole proprietor and still have an operational business with a likelihood of earning a profit, right? Because what they want to make sure is they don't want people to set up a 401k. They're contributory accounts. They want you to set up the 401k to use it. If you just wanted to park it in a traditional IRA, it works the same. But if you are going to go forward and set up some sort of qualified account like a 401k, typically you could probably do that the first year. But if you went multiple years without contributing to it, the IRS at some point could have an issue with that.
That you could pass down an IRA to a non-spouse. Is that the same for if you pass away before you turn the age for required of the RMDs?
Yeah, great question. So the question was these non-spouse beneficiary elections, meaning the beneficiaries inherit your IRA. What are their options? And there's three, right? Lump sum, 5-year, life expectancy. The question had to do with if you have or haven't reached RMD stage, which would be 70.5 on a pre-tax account, what are the requirements? If you have reached 70.5 when you pass away and your beneficiary elects life expectancy, it will be based on your life expectancy, not theirs. Once you pass 70.5, the clock is now permanent for life expectancy. They could still choose the lump sum or 5-year with no impact because neither of those have RMDs. But even if you gave it to your youngest grandchild or great-grandchild who was 5, they still would have to take it over your life expectancy, right? So if you died at 71 and the uniform life table says you'll live till 82, you have 11 years. So your beneficiary, in this case, the 5-year-old, would basically have to take it out over an 11-year period because it's based on yours. If you died at 70, not 70.5, then it would be based on your heirs' life expectancy. And that's where spouse beneficiaries become very attractive because one of the things that's really cool about it is if you pass away first and you give it to your spouse can make it their own, which means they can in turn also have beneficiaries. Right? So you can pass, they can receive it, they can eventually pass, right? Hopefully a good long time, and then they can pass it down. If you were to pass and pass it directly to a child, they cannot pass it down again from there as a general rule. So there's some practical elements of going to a spouse first. But once the RMD kicks in at the account holder level, death doesn't wipe it away. It's permanent, right? Let me address these online and we'll wrap up. It says, is there an age limit for rolling traditional to a Roth? The answer is no. If you do a Roth conversion after age 70 and a half, you have to withdraw the year's RMD first. So if I'm 72 and I have a $100,000 IRA and my RMD is $5,000, I can only convert 95 to the Roth, and I have to take the other 5 as my RMD for that year. Once it's in the Roth, I no longer have to take an RMD going forward, but I have to satisfy that year's RMD requirement, if that makes sense. Is it advantageous to file separate and convert spouse's IRA has little to no income? I can't answer that question. That's an accountant question. From what I understand, generally when you file separately from a tax perspective for a lot of IRA things, there's a lot of restrictions on it to avoid that very thing from happening. But you certainly could take a look at that as an opportunity, but that would be a strategy with an accountant. I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about filing separately and the nuances associated with that. It says, can a traditional IRA be converted to an HSA? I believe, yes, there is a provision. I don't know if it still exists. Excuse me. Where you can make a one-time movement of money into an HSA from a traditional. It was a few years back. I don't see many people do it. I know that what they were trying to do is encourage people to move their money into HSAs. Not a lot, but they wanted to give them some seed money for qualifying medical expenses. But if you take a look online, you'll probably get an answer to that. I have not seen that in many years. I know that provision was enabled. I just don't know if it was permanent or one time. Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us live and also to all of you that have joined us over the internet. Thank you very much. If there are topics or ideas or things that we can discuss that you think will be beneficial, please, provide us with that feedback. We'll provide you guys with a link to the presentation so you have it for future use or to forward on to colleagues or friends, family members. But if you do have any feedback on things we can do better, or again, different topics that may not be square down the middle of the plate for self-direction, but touch it, either we're happy to provide that content or bring in people that we know in the industry to share that content. So without any other questions, thank you guys very much for joining us and take care.